You might have heard of an organism that doesn't age. Elijah would. No, Toratopsis dohrnii, the immortal jellyfish, that if injured can regenerate themselves, if stressed can revert back to an earlier stage of development. Think Benjamin Button, or most people, I guess, during exam season. But essentially, these creatures can start life again. Aging's a real problem. Most people die from it. But only until recently have we switched our thinking about aging from something that is inevitable to something that's more like a disease that we can treat, and in theory, we can stop. Today, I want to talk to you about what causes aging, why does it happen, and how some scientists are going to find a cure. I'm Dr. Ben Miles, a PhD physicist turned entrepreneur. I care about turning science into startups, so the discoveries that we make in the lab can actually find their way and benefit society. So let's get started. What is aging? We all kind of know at least the external signs of what aging looks like. That unexpected grey hair, forgetting why you entered a room, that sudden onset, disappointing, dad bod. These are all the external signs, but there's a whole bunch of stuff happening on the inside also, at the cellular level. And that's where really the proper trouble arises. But what causes that? To find out, I reached out to a researcher turned entrepreneur, Professor Lorna Harries from the University of Exeter, to talk to her about what the process is behind aging and also what her work has done to discover a potential mechanism to halt that aging and even reverse it.
We're involved in work that's really about kind of the nuts and bolts of cell biology and molecular genetics. It's really everything between DNA and protein and how that might be applied. So as we age, we accumulate these cells in all of our tissues and our organs, which are called senescent cells. And these senescent cells are one of the things that drive not only the aging process, but also age-related diseases.
One particular aging mechanism called senescence is, at least until very recently, an irreversible form of long-term cell cycle arrest caused by excessive intracellular and extracellular stress or damage. What does that mean in human being words? Essentially, the cell has realized that it has become damaged and it's decided not to propagate, not to reproduce. More than anything we've really ever seen before, I guess, these senescent cells are cracks in organisms that allow diseases to creep in. Things like osteoporosis, things like cardiovascular disease, osteoarthritis, pulmonary fibrosis, neurodegenerative diseases, metabolic dysfunctions. At the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is senescent cells are real troublemakers. And I think it's important to clarify here at this point that the excessive use of lotions, potions, drinking organic, green, detox, juice blends are completely irrelevant when it comes to these troublemaking cells.
As we age, our cells lose the ability to regulate the expression of their genes. So you lose the ability to decide which RNA isoforms are made from. So most genes can give you, don't just make one thing, genes make a bunch of things. And the decision as to what's made is made by a group of proteins called splicing factors. And those splicing factors, as we age, they get turned off. And that means that your cells cannot then adapt to their environment. They can't deal with challenge. They're really not very resistant to stress, which is really bad for cells.
Aging, scientifically speaking, is a decreased resilience of your cells to deal with stress and environmental factors. As a result, they're more likely to develop disease as you age, which is why you're more likely to die as you get older. In theory, if we could reverse this decline, if we could stop those cells losing their resilience, these diseases really shouldn't manifest themselves to the same extent, and we should live much longer, much healthier lives. So this process is actually a really good thing in theory. The whole purpose of this cell cycle arrest is to limit the proliferation of damaged cells. I always mess that word up. To eliminate accumulated harmful factors, to essentially disable potential malignant cell transformations, so that these cells, if they hadn't gone on to be halted to stop their reproduction, otherwise they could have gone on to turn into cancers, turn into tumors, those sorts of things. But unfortunately, it can have some negative consequences. It's not a perfect solution. These cells affect the surrounding cells in their area. They cause inflammation, they slow down surrounding cell regeneration, and they affect the signaling between these cells and a bunch of other kind of problems.
A lot of the diseases of aging all track back to a small number of common molecular mechanisms which underpin a lot of them.
The question becomes, how do we stop this from happening? This is the problem that has evaded solution for a very, very long time. We have become very good at treating other harmful cell defects. The same tricks that work on cancer cells that makes them susceptible to chemotherapy unfortunately don't apply to senescent cells. In fact, I've found a lot of papers that say just the reverse. Chemotherapy actually increases the likelihood that healthy as well as cancerous cells can actually become senescent. Now, this is where Lorna's work comes in.
So what Senisca is doing is we've uncovered the master control genes that control this process, and we can target them so that we can now use oligonucleotide therapies to restore their expression back to where it would be in young cells. And yes, indeed, they do switch the splicing factors back on, but to our utter amazement, they also rejuvenated the cells.
Oligonucleotides are short sequences of DNA or RNA, essentially instruction set to the cell. Lorna and her team have found an instruction set that essentially reboots that cell. Not too different to the immortal jellyfish, I guess, where can revert back to an earlier state, a healthier version of themselves, and then begin to age again as normal.
Age-related diseases are responsible for the vast majority of our NHS expenditure. If we could cure the diseases of aging tomorrow, we would save somewhere in the region of $4 trillion by 2060. I don't think there's ever been a better time to start an RNA therapeutics company. You look at what's going on with the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, and it's obviously RNA-based. It's brought RNA biology and the potential of RNA to the forefront. It's always been a little bit of the poor cousin of DNA. Now people are actually seeing us as a major player in our own right.
As our ability as scientists improves and we continue to develop the tools and the language to control these cells, I really think that aging, at least in the way we currently think about it, within our lifetime, is going to become a thing of the past. Next week, I want to explore how Lorna and her team are getting their discovery into the hands of the public as a startup company, and how you might benefit from their work in the hopefully not too distant future. Subscribe if you don't want to miss it, support the channel with a like, and thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time.